Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Friday, January 16th because once again, a free agent is come off the board and the Toronto Blue Jays are not the signing team. This time it is the New York Mets agreeing to a 3-year, $126 million contract with Bo Bichette. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, I mean, obviously we recorded the Tucker episode late last night and we're here, I suppose, not even 10 hours later. And the Mets really quickly pivoted from Tucker to land this and not even really much of an opportunity. I figure that, Bo probably heard from the people involved in the Tucker sweepstakes. And once he got that offer with a $42 million AAV, it was probably not very hard for him to accept and put pen to paper there.
Didn't we just do this, man? Didn't we just freaking do this? 9 hours ago, we uploaded Kyle Tucker, Spurs, Blue Jays. And I don't know what we're going to call this episode, but certainly it's not going to be a happier thumbnail or a happier title than the one that we had less than 12 hours ago. Bo Bichette goes to the New York Mets, and the Blue Jays miss out on both of the big fish in a basically 12-hour span. And everything is bad and everything is awful, and the offense goes from a potential AL favorite, AL East favorite, to merely a strong contender. Is that even the case? I don't know at this point even, but they get nobody. They don't get Tucker, they don't get Bichette, and now congratulations, Kazuma Okamoto, you are the headliner of the Blue Jays additions on the offensive side of the baseball. Hope you have a 4-win season in you because you are going to have some big shoes to fill.
Yeah, so we obviously talked a lot about Bo last night when we recorded the Tucker episode as he went to the Dodgers. And, I think at that point, talking through it, we're kind of sitting there and it's kind of like, well, there's value to maybe going a little bit above and beyond with the lack of impact offensive players, lack of impact bats available over the next couple off seasons. And Bo had a pretty clear spot in this Blue Jays offense, and whether he signed to play second base or shortstop, it seemed like the Blue Jays were kind of looking or needed that type of elite, hitting skill at the top of their lineup, right? So, I've seen a lot of it's an overpay by the Mets kind of thing, right? And obviously it's a lot of money and it has the 2 opt-outs and all this and that. But, at the end of the day, I mean, if you're the Blue Jays trying to keep up in this AL East, maybe not keep up, but trying to maintain your spot atop the AL East, then, Bo would have certainly been a really nice way to do that. Tucker would have certainly been a really nice way to do that. But as we also said last night, the Blue Jays group of position players is projected to be the 5th best in baseball as things currently stand here on January 16th, with a fair bit of activity on the free agent market still to come beyond these 2 signings. But, we'll see how it all plays out if the Jays are officially done, if they pivot to Bellinger, if they feel like that's a worthwhile move when, again, we talked about it last night, but Bellinger, maybe the impact offensively there doesn't quite reach the levels of a Bo or a Tucker. And it's going to be interesting to see like what comes next for the Blue Jays, or if this is it for their offseason.
I don't see where else they could go out and add, unless they want to pivot to like Framber Valdez, which would be a pretty big surprise, I think, at this point. This feels awful. I don't know how else to put it. I don't know. To me, this is kind of like the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and once again, the Jays get caught holding the bag, and where do you go from here? I don't know if there is somewhere to go from here. It kind of feels like that was it. That was your ticket. You're going to get one of those two guys. Ideally, you were almost certain that you were. And now you walk away with neither of them. Not to mention, you don't walk away with Alex Bregman, by the way, who was another guy the Jays were linked to at the top of the market. And now they don't have a key bat for the 2026 season. Like you basically are going to need Addison Barger to evolve into an elite hitter or Kazuma Okamoto to dramatically outplay his projections because you're missing basically a 140 WRC plus bat somewhere at the top of your lineup that you had maybe not penciled in, but you certainly felt very comfortable saying that you were going to walk away with one of them on, say, January 1st.
Yeah. I think when you look at what they did last year, I mean, Bo was obviously a huge part of the regular season success and, have that getting to the division title. But I mean, I guess at the same time, they did play without him for most of the postseason, right? He wasn't there for the ALDS, he wasn't there for the ALCS, and the Blue Jays offense was one of the best of all time in the playoffs, and that was, a group that now is going to add Anthony Santander to it, who, as we said again last night, surely won't be much worse than he was last year. It'll add Okamoto, who, we'll kind of see, but again, the floor is really high with his skill sets and what you might get there. And you hope for a full season of Varsho that he's able to maintain the gains that he made last year. You hope that a full season of Barger and maybe he takes the lessons that he learned during the postseason, where I think he had the lowest chase rate in the entire postseason last year. So you kind of hope that those gains stick. You hope that Springer, I doubt that he's repeating a 166 WRC plus, but you hope that he's able to remain an above average contributor and probably a significant contributor at that. Even if it's like a 40-point drop off in the WRC plus, if he's like a 120 guy, you're probably really happy with that. And you hope that Vlad maybe takes that kind of step forward after looking like the best hitter in the world during the playoffs.
I don't know. There's a lot of different outcomes for this team, it feels like. And adding a Tucker or a Bichette, or even retaining, I guess is the term you should use in the Bichette case, it would have just, again, it would have solidified them as a team on par with the Dodgers and capable of competing for a World Series. And all of a sudden, you got neither. And now, are they even the favorites to win the American League East?
I think as things stand, I would still say yes, right? Like even though they missed out on these two guys, I think they still had a good offseason, right? Last year, the biggest issue that they had was with their pitching staff, and they addressed that by signing Dylan Cease, by signing Cody Ponce, by signing Tyler Rogers. And the pitching staff is in a much better place. The bullpen is in a much better place entering the season than it was last year. And you won't be able to replace the raw production. I would imagine that Bo gave you, but they are probably adding a little more slug with Okamoto than Bo ultimately ended the year with. And again, you're hoping on some of that positive regression from a guy like Santander, from a guy like Jimenez, and hopefully that isn't going to be able to make up for it, but at least it will hopefully give them some coverage there.
I don't know. It's tough. It's tough again to just. I just want to go back. Just the kind of the. It's tough, man. To have a 24, 12-hour really stretch like this. I don't know. I don't know how you don't feel just hopeless.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at the base that they had and the success that they had last season and the work that they did early in the offseason, right? Like I think that it's clear that they were happy with where their group was and that they weren't going to go above and beyond to grab either of these players. And I think, for Tucker, they obviously went to the long-term deal. We still don't know what the number was. And for Bo, it sounds like maybe they just kind of weren't in the realm of where the Mets or even the Phillies, who offered 7 years and 200 million apparently for Bo per Bob Nightingale. But I think that the work that they did early in the offseason and is as you sit here in the aftermath of both of these players leaving or not signing with Toronto, that it kind of sucks because you felt like they were going to cap off like this A plus off season, but it still has been a really good winner, especially when you look back at when you compare what the Blue Jays have done this winter to what teams across baseball have done, like they did some really, really nice work. But ultimately, I think that there is some significance to today being, the Tucker thing aside, like the Bo thing, where this is a guy who, you draft in 2016 and you develop into an all-star level shortstop, and he, was really a franchise icon, right? And he'll have a place in Blue Jays history. And, do I think that there's a chance that he would come back in free agency if he chooses to opt out of any of his years of the deal with the Mets? Like maybe, but I did want to touch on kind of Bo's Blue Jays career because it is a significant day. The fact that he has left this guy who was a two-time All-Star, one of the best shortstops in franchise history. For you, like what space does Bichette hold in the Blue Jays lore now that we know he is not returning?
You know, it's interesting because it doesn't feel like the Jays have had a homegrown guy walk out the door of this capacity in at, at the minimum, probably like a decade. But, even at that, I think of guys like Edwin Encarnacion and Jose Bautista when they left, they were not in their prime. I mean, if you really want to go back, Roy Halladay gets traded. I think you're going all the way back to like Carlos Delgado, the last time a guy of this caliber was out the door as a free agent, unless, I'm missing someone. This is a pretty substantial kind of move away from not necessarily the way the Jays have operated. They've been in that top tier of free agents regardless, and they were in the market on Bichette the whole time, it seems like. Maybe not at the top of it, but certainly in it. This is unique in Blue Jays history, losing a guy to free agency for nothing. And, you know, the Bichette era kind of had its, sort of closure, or maybe this is just me personally, kind of at the end of the World Series. This is kind of felt like he's not a Blue Jay, or he hasn't been a Blue Jay for a while here, a little bit. But still, for it to be the case, maybe it'll hit a little differently when, February 14th or 15th, whatever rolls around, and the first pictures of him in the all black jersey or in the purple grimace jersey for the Mets, maybe that'll change how you look at things. But right now, it's a lot of kind of disappointment at the Blue Jays not getting the guy, as opposed to maybe disappointment or sadness at losing Bo Bichette. There's a certain sense of, you know, they were in it, they should have gotten one of these guys. But I think if you ask me when we, in a month's time do our spring training outlook, I think there'll be a very different feeling in terms of Bichette and his place, and, the reminiscing and the thoughts on him and his time as a Toronto Blue Jay.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at like the career shortstop leaderboards for the Blue Jays, I mean, Tony Fernandez is far and away the probably the best shortstop in franchise history. I mean, he's just has like such a wide gap in games played. He's the WAR leader, he's the hits leader, but when you look at it, I mean, Bo is second in WAR, second in hits, first in homers, um, second in RBIs. Like it was a really good run and like really cool to see kind of his development from top prospect to all-star to kind of veteran leader. I don't know, obviously we're not in the room, like but it seems like he kind of had like a quiet like leadership role on the team. And obviously, he has his wedding, and you see all the teammates that he had there, and it just seems like um it's interesting when you get to like our age now and you kind of see like the entirety of people's careers, right? Like it's growing up, you come in and you kind of see that, but you don't like necessarily kind of notice like the growth and the development that people have. And it's funny, seeing Bo from like the kid with the Bo flows who was playing MLB The Show in the lockout or during the COVID break on in the MLB The Show league to the guy who hits the home run off Shohei Ohtani in Game 7 of the World Series. Um it's really interesting, I think, when you take a step back just to kind of consider all of that stuff and see where he started and where he ended up.
I mean, I still remember where I was when I read about them drafting him. I remember reading it on it was Bluebird Banter when it was, I think it was still is SB Nation or it was SB Nation at the time or whatever it may have been. And you heard all about this wacky swing that the guy's got and all the moving parts. And if you watch video from 2016, he has quieted down his swing, which is really saying something about
Breaking news. We just got a text in our group chat. Shout out Ryan. Bichette to the Mets. Breaking news.
You know
Uh,
what? It's just it's like I kind of said, it's a tough day in a couple of facets, and I think there'll be a lot of kind of nostalgia for Bo Bichette
yeah.
in the kind of days and weeks to come.
Yeah, Mets play in Toronto in June 2026. June 29th is the date that they
That'll be
come.
a hot
So
ticket.
that'll be yeah,
Hold on, June 29th. Are they
yes.
there for Canada Day? I think that would be
They
Canada
are
Day.
indeed. They are, yeah. So it's June 29th, June 30th, and July 1st is the three-game series that the Mets are in Toronto. So
Wow, Bo Bichette in town for the Canada Day game. That is gonna be a great game.
that'll be I'm sure the video tribute will be very nice. But um interesting for that it was the Mets. I saw a tweet, Twitter's like not even loading for me right now, but I saw a tweet earlier that said that the Mets had always planned to pivot to Bichette if they missed out on Tucker, which I think is pretty interesting. Just given, it seems like the Mets had entered the offseason being like, we're going to prioritize defense and base running and all of this, and then they signed Bo Bichette to play him at third base. Um,
Third baseman Bo Bichette, by the way, is going to be an adventure, to say the least. I think.
Yeah, well, they already had, obviously Francisco Lindor, who's not moving off shortstop for anybody, and Marcus Semien playing second base, and um, as we were talking last night, I think I said Mets might pivot to Bellinger, and I thought Bellinger would be maybe a cleaner fit for them, but now obviously it was Bo. Were you surprised when the notification came down that it was the Mets?
I think I was surprised. I don't know if I was shocked. We hadn't heard anything about, you know, Bichette going to the Mets, but you kind of figured that, they were a team that clearly had aspirations of shopping at the top of the market. I think that it's probably not stunning, but certainly was a surprise when you ultimately did see that come down.
Yeah. It's I mean, at this point, the top free agents, I mean, we obviously saw it with Tucker, but it's kind of like this very small group of teams that are able to compete in this financial group, and we'd already, we don't need to relitigate all the stuff that we talked about, like with the impact of the Tucker deal, but um yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see in the offseason going forward. I would be in, obviously there's so much at stake next year with the CBA coming up, but we'll be really interested to see future off seasons do look like as far as, if other teams can kind of get involved on these top free agents outside of the Blue Jays, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Phillies, and the Yankees, really.
Yeah, it does seem like there is a reckoning coming, certainly for Major League Baseball at the very top of the market. The Blue Jays could be swept up in that. I mean, they're obviously not the Dodgers, but they're still third in payroll. This could get nasty.
What do you think about the double play combination of Ernie Clement and Andres Jimenez?
Defensively, it'll be very exciting. I
It'll
don't know
be
if I have
great,
any.
great for pitchers. Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything outside of
So
that. I do think though, and I've floated this name before. All of a sudden, Framber Valdez as a ground ball guy kind of looks kind of nice.
um yeah, it would be that would be quite the pivot if they just said, yeah, we're just gonna go out and get Framber and then, you know, Trey Savage is starting the year in AAA or what's the deal there? Um
Jose Barrios to the San Francisco Giants. That's what happens.
yeah, we'll see. I'm sure that they do have some moves. Obviously, they have some upper minors depth that's kind of all pooling, and I did kind of want to get your take on how things line up now. If this is it for the Blue Jays, um, it seems like Barger probably is your right fielder, and we'd heard that Okamoto is set to be a super utility player, but to me, this is kind of like Okamoto's your third baseman, instead of, trying to swing him around to positions that he hasn't really played in the past couple years.
Yeah, and we'll get into all of that, I'm sure, in future episodes in terms of a real kind of breakdown of 1 through 26. But as things stand, I think you can probably pencil Okamoto in as your third baseman, given that, the decision to kind of describe him as a utility guy, probably more of a leverage play at the time. I'm not really entirely sure what, second baseman Okamoto or, God forbid, shortstop Okamoto could possibly have looked like.
Shortstop. That would have been something if they were putting him at short. But yeah, we will obviously have much more reaction and much more stuff to come as the off season keeps going. There's still a handful of players to go. Framber, Gino Suarez, Bellinger, and a ton of guys behind that. Bassett, Scherzer, Sir Anthony Dominguez is still out there. But yeah, we'll have more stuff as things continue to come down, and as the World Baseball Classic and spring training near or draw closer, and hopefully as I get over this cold, we'll be able to jump back into it. But thank you everyone for listening. That is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening.